Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning, Talimitra. Morning, Sridevi, Shradajit, Shraddha.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning. Morning, Silanata.
Good morning.
Did you have a good birthday, Ratnakar?
Yes, thank you. I did. Very good. Fantastic cake made by Lizzie, who lives here. One of the best cakes I've ever had.
Vegan, I suppose.
Was it vegan? It might have been vegan. I don't know.
I hope so.
Yeah. Morning, Maya.
Morning, Ratnakosha and everybody.
Hello, Vimal Nandi.
Good morning. Hope you had a lovely birthday yesterday.
I did. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Good.
Hello, Kemajoti.
Yeah, happy birthday for yesterday.
Thank you. Morning, Kashti.
Good morning to you all.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I'm Ratnakosha.
Hi. Is it going well for you? The retreat, I mean. Yes, thumbs up. Anything in particular that you're finding particularly helpful or useful?
Well, it's all good.
Oh, good. All right.
It's all good. I think what's good is that they've all got it seems to me they all have quite a different way in. So Vidyamala's got quite a body kind of overview thing and like this and this, but you know, it's just about moving towards or me. So she's good at kind of summarizing it, and then you've got like at the other end of the spectrum, you've got Dhammarati, who's kind of going into the Pali and kind of pulling it apart. And I think having them together is really helpful for me anyway, because then I can sort of zoom in and have clarity, and then zoom out and have a kind of more of a sense of things.
Yeah, they have got, oh, sorry.
Go on, Chandrati. Maitri.
Between them, they have got such a vast experience, and I'm just grateful that they're sharing, especially their personal experience with us. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think for me, yeah, very, very rich, lots of just enjoying the way they use language and the way things are led, and yeah, the details, but getting more of an overview of the Satipatthana and the Anapanasati, which is kind of a bargain for that, but that's obviously really helpful. So, but I feel like it's a lot, isn't it? There's a lot in there, so it's going to take me a while to kind of assimilate. I feel very sort of full, and that it's all, there's a process of assimilation needed.
And are you finding you're able to do the meditation sessions and so on?
Mostly, yeah. Yeah.
I really appreciate that, because I am so much alone. It's such a difference meditating with other people, even on Zoom.
Yes. And presumably the meditation reviews are useful or helpful.
Yeah, a good. I missed the one yesterday, but it's a great way of doing it. I think we're all order members, and just to kind of have that space to go into the specifics of what's going on is, you might think there's not an hour is a long time, but there's loads to there's loads to talk about.
Well, it's an interesting way to meet other order members, talking about your meditation practice rather than just where you're from and what do you do.
Yeah. I always find like when we have like reporting in, I always feel like, oh God, because I don't want to necessarily hear, it's not like I'm uninterested in people's lives, but I'm more interested in like their connection with the Dharma and how it brings them alive. And I much prefer groups where the focus is the Dharma, because you get to know the people anyway through that, but in a kind of vital way, which isn't just like, and then I've got a cat and stuff, because that all comes out, doesn't it? But it's not the important stuff. The important stuff's the Dharma. So I really appreciate it, because I feel like I'm getting to know the guys in my group really well, but because we're talking about the Dharma, it's because there's really vital communication.
Well, you're sharing what you have in common.
Yeah, exactly. We're kind of going from the highest common denominator, and then the other stuff sort of comes in as appropriate. I much prefer that.
Yeah. Here. There's so many of us now. Taking in people's life stories is just overwhelming. So I can't deal with it.
Hello, Vidyamala. Good evening.
What time is it in New Zealand?
9:25 in the PM.
What? Say the first number again.
It's 9:25 in the PM.
9:25. My goodness.
Yes.
How does that work then? So if you do this session, you're up until what, like midnight or something?
And then I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to be woke enough in time for the group. So yeah. So I have been ducking out early in the evening session by about 11:15 or something like that, just so I get enough sleep.
Impressive dedication. So yeah, inspiring.
It's been a great retreat though. It's lovely sharing it with people from all over the place and so diverse. Really, really cool.
Good morning, Vidyamala.
Good morning. I'm just about awake.
Yes, it's very early morning for you, isn't it?
It's 5:30. But I do have coffee, so the world is good.
Coffee and a gompa.
Cheers, everybody.
I know it's been said before, but the international thing that you get on these Zoom retreats is just wonderful.
Yeah.
It just feels different somehow. There's that breadth. I don't know. I really, really love that.
What is anybody from a different country who's not got their country written on the thing? Jaya Shraddha, where are you?
I'm in Wales.
You're in Wales. That's a different country, isn't it? Oh, yeah.
Well, we're missing Vajrachakshu at the moment, who's in Turkey. It's probably about midday or after midday in Turkey. And we're missing somebody.
Dhammarati. It's unusual not to have Dhammarati here.
Yes.
Yeah, he's in
Netherlands.
He's in the Netherlands, yeah.
And Pranyamai is in Dublin. She's not here.
And I'm in Ireland, in County Louth.
Who's that?
Atulya Mitra.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, here comes Vajrachakshu.
Be nice if people put where they are on their screens. You could see it if you fancy doing that.
Do that.
Did you hear that, Vajrachakshu? People are requesting that you put Istanbul or Turkey on the stream. So that
Okie dokes, yeah, I can do that.
We probably know that he's there.
Let's do that. 1 second.
So we're shortly going over to the shrine room. I think somebody is just arriving. I'm sitting here with Patrick. He's so quiet. You think I'm here? Patrick
Morning,
is,
Patrick.
Morning, Patrick.
Morning, Patrick.
It's funny, I'm not known for being quiet, so as I'm sure Kama Jyoti will attest to.
I was thinking that's unusual. You must be really transforming quickly
That's
at
right.
Ashtana.
That's right. I am calming down a lot. Yeah. Well, at times at least. Yeah.
He's not shy, that's for sure. Yes. Are we going over, Patrick?
Yeah, I think it looks like they might be nearly ready.
Okay. See you later this afternoon.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so it's 10:30 our time, so we'll begin. If you could salute the shrine, and I think we're supposed to put masks on, but of course I've forgotten mine. There might be one in the back of my chair. Could you look, please? There's a little pocket there.
Do I have to touch it? I can touch it.
I hope there's no one from Public Health England watching.
Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Dhammaya.
Namo Dhammaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Namah.
Namo So as always, good morning everyone, and good morning, lovely people out there. Oh look, let's all wave. Saw Dhamma waving, that's nice. And you've got such a strong sense of you all, and we got the picture down here where you're all waving and looking happy, so it's lovely. May that be so today. Okay, so as I said yesterday, today we're going to look at the dhammas section. And then tomorrow we've got an open morning of practice, which will be an opportunity to play and to absorb and assimilate and play with the skills that you've learnt this week. Now, I'm imagining that some of us are quite full up already. So I'm going to try and keep this fairly simple today, even though the section is really complicated, or it looks complicated. So for those of you who've had a look at the sutta, it's got 6 sections, but it's generally accepted by the scholars that the heart of the Dhamma section is the hindrances and the awakening factors. And we kind of did the hindrances yesterday because we looked at that section of the chitta section of greed, hatred, delusion, contraction, distraction, which are very, very similar to the hindrances. So we're not going to look at those today, but we're going to dwell upon the awakening factors, which is the arising of these ever more open states So I'll just briefly remind us what they are. So this is the text. Again, in regard to dhammas, one contemplates dhammas, one abides. And of course, abiding, as I said right at the beginning, is to see again and again, which is very nice, anupassati. One abides contemplating dhammas in terms of the 7 awakening factors. Here, if the mindfulness awakening factor is present, one knows there is the mindfulness awakening factor in me. If the mindfulness awakening factor is not present, one knows there is no mindfulness awakening factor in me. So that's quite simple. You kind of know, you just check in with yourself. Am I mindful right now? Am I present right now? And of course, as soon as you know you're not present, you're present. So that's what you call a win-win situation. So you absolutely cannot fail at this. Yeah. And also, very importantly, one knows how the unarisen mindfulness awakening factor can arise. So you're looking at the conditions for mindfulness, and how the arisen mindfulness awakening factor can be perfected by development. So we also reinforce the skills to stay mindful, put in place the conditions to stay mindful. Yes, there's quite a lot of words, but it's very simple teaching. Likewise with the investigation of dhammas awakening factor, which is generally seen to be using our awareness to look at our subjective experience from the perspective of the Dhamma. So we're tuning into what's going on inside. Is it tending to move towards the skillful or the unskillful? So it's a kind of intensification of the mindfulness. And again, you know how the unarisen investigation of dhammas can arise and how the arisen investigation of dhammas can be perfected by development. So how can we intensify our awareness of our subjective experience in light of the Dhamma, which I think we can take the skill that we've had all week of, am I tending towards shutting down, closing down, contracting, or am I tending towards opening up? Likewise with energy, virya. Again, it's quite simple. Is there energy in me right now? Or is there no energy in me right now? How can the unarisen energy arise? And how, if we've got energy, how can it be intensified? Joy, piti. Piti or pretty. I was thinking the other day when you talked about that zone, that was quite nice. So obviously, if you pronounce it as piti, you're going to hear that as piti. But I noticed Dhammarati called it piti, which is obviously sounds a bit different. But then pretty, that's a pretty word, isn't it? So I was thinking pretty, that's nice. It has a kind of onomatopoeic thing. But that's a beautiful word. Anyway, that's just my own associations. And I looked it up this morning, different translations of piti. And one is joyful interest. I thought that was really good. So joyful interest. So are we interested in our experience with this quality of, sort of almost delight in the fact that we can be interested? Yeah. And then it's things like enthusiasm, sensation of physical and mental lightness given by the purity of consciousness. That's quite nice. Sort of this lightness inside. Happiness, these kind of words. It's translated as joy in this version of the sutta. But as we were discussing the other day, joy can sound quite big. But it's everything from joyful interest, well, that still could sound quite big. Enthusiasm, that can be quite subtle, can't it? Interest, curiosity, these kind of feelings. And then tranquility, passaddhi. We know, is it present? Is it not present? If it's not present, how might it arise? If it is present, how can it be intensified? Yes? Did you say passaddhi? Passaddhi. I think it's Passaddhi, that's the Pali. And that's things like calmness, tranquility, serenity. So going back to the conversation we had the other day about emotions like grief, you know, could that fall into this category? I think it could, because things like calmness, and there can be I mean, obviously grief can be a very intense emotion, but it can have a quality of satisfaction, as we talked about the other day, that can have a quality of calm. So we need to get at what these words are pointing to rather than being literal about the words. So the sense of wholeness, completion, calm that arises when we've integrated and settled. And then the concentration factor, seeing if it's there or not there. If it's not there, how might it arise? If it is there, how can it be intensified? And then equanimity is the last one. Is there a sense of balance in one's experience or not? If there isn't, how can it be brought into being? And if it is, how can it be stabilized and perfected? So even this language of perfected might sound like, if it's not perfect, it's not enough. But again, it's telling us, how can we stabilize it? How can we rest there and allow it to become stronger? So it's a kind of spiral path. And so I just want to say a little something about that. So we've got, obviously we're quite familiar with the positive nidana chain. We've got another spiral path here. And then we've got the dhyanas, which in a sense is another similar process of coming together, energy arising, energy settling and stabilizing. So we've got these different maps, but they're all telling us what happens to the human psychophysical continuum, the mind-body stream, when we are moving or when we're opening into greater spaciousness, and when we're no longer so bound by a sort of limited, fixed sense of things. So it's interesting, isn't it? All these spiral paths and the dhyana factors, they follow exactly the same energetic arc. So we can just look for that in our experience, a sense of integration coming together. And then out of that, we get a release of energy. And Bante's, I was reading Living with Awareness this morning, and about Priti, he was definitely describing it as release of energy blocks, which is what Sona was talking about the other day. So if you don't have very much of this kind of more explosive energy, it might just be that you're already quite integrated. Because I think what can happen is some of us can think, oh, I'm not having any of that, so therefore I'm really blocked. I mean, I can sometimes get into that. So I found it quite encouraging reading Living with Awareness. It might be, I'm not saying it is, but it's possible, because I've had decades of body work, decades of osteopathy, acupuncture, these kind of things, that actually, some of the grosser physical blocks have been released through those kind of treatments, because certainly I've had big reactions to treatments over the years. So I don't know, it's impossible. I mean, I might just be really blocked, I don't know. But I found it encouraging that if we're not having this more sort of gross, really rapturous release, it doesn't necessarily mean that our practice is any less. It might just be that for us, with our psychophysical system, that's not the way it's going to be. And then, this kind of release, we're more integrated, there's release, openness, and then there's this sort of stilling and calming, satisfaction, rest, and then gradually everything just becomes more and more still, more and more present, and there's that quality of equanimity. Yeah, so I was thinking this morning about maps, actually, because obviously we've got a map of the sutta, which is quite a detailed map. Dhyana factors, we've got another map, the nidana chains, we've got another map. And maps are really, really useful. If you think about it in your life, if you're going somewhere, it's helpful having a map, isn't it? If you're climbing a mountain, it's good to know the best route up the mountain, or else you might just go round and round in circles at the bottom of the mountain. which would be a shame. But if you're climbing a mountain all the time, you're just looking at the map, that wouldn't be a very satisfying experience either. You're using the map in order to really enjoy the scenery. You're using the map so that you can take this route, so that you can really, really enjoy the walk. Or if you're going on a car journey, you know, you've got a map from Adistana to Glasgow. You can either just be looking at your sat-nav the entire way. Well, obviously if you're the passenger. If you're the driver, you might like to look at the road. But let's just say you're the navigator in the passenger seat, and you're telling the driver where to go, and the whole time you're just looking at the sat-nav. That would be really disappointing, wouldn't it? Whereas you could be looking out the window and really enjoying, you know, the beautiful fields and the sunlight and thunderstorm and all these other things. So I thought that was quite a good analogy, really. We need the map, but we shouldn't get fixated on the map. And all the, you know, the Buddha's just giving us all these different ways to access this experience of opening up. I think that's really what's going on. And, you know, ultimately we open up to the boundless. And ultimately we're completely free of this very sort of limited, contracted way of being. Yeah, so maps are good, but not to be taken as a sort of end in themselves. So what we'll do now is I'll lead us in a meditation, just looking at the presence or absence of these qualities. And if it's absent, there's something you can do to bring it into being. If it's present, what happens if you dwell there? And, you know, according to the text, if you dwell there, that will quite naturally give rise to the next experience. But what will be happening this morning, I would imagine, for most of us, if not all of us, is we'll be moving in and out. So we might have a bit of a taste of something, and then we'll have a bit of craving come in, or we'll have a bit of rehearsing come in, or have a bit of worrying come in, and then, you know, come back to the body, the rock of the body and the breath, and then move back into exploring that awakening factor. So I don't think in experience, there'll be many of us that literally go completely in mindfulness and then completely in Dhammavichaya and completely in energy. Maybe there's some people who can do that, but it's more likely that we'll be dipping in and out, and then we'll have little tastes. And what happens if you go there? So the point I'm trying to make here is, say we get to the tranquility awakening factor, and you've been completely lost up to that point. Don't think, well, I can't have any experience of that because I didn't have the preceding one. You know, it might be when you just bring to mind tranquility. Oh, yes, here it is. I feel calm. I feel satisfied. I feel whole. So to delight in that. So they love beautiful, beautiful states, and it's about enjoyment and learning how to enjoy this exploration of the body, mind, heart. Yeah. And, you know, please don't judge yourselves, just see it as a journey. It's an opportunity to play, get a bit closer to what's happening. So I'm just going to stand up for a minute. So if you settle yourselves up for your meditation. So in the lead through, I'll just name each section. In fact, I might just literally read out that section of the sutta. Let's listen to the word of the Buddha, and then I'll have a space, and then we'll go on to the next session. And please approach this all with a delicate, loving, playful, curious attitude. And If there's something that's, you just can't really get into the practice because there's something really strong happening, you could go back to the method from yesterday of taking it for a walk in a big field with love, with kindness, giving it attention, and then coming back to the practice when you're ready. So first of all, let's establish our foundation. So allowing the body to rest down onto the chair, the cushions, the floor, to yield and to receive the support. So straight away, we're releasing some of our tendencies to grip and to hold on. And we're allowing ourselves to be held and supported by the floor, the chair, the cushions. I'm resting inside, breathing inside the body. Letting the body be soft and receptive to breathing. Letting the buttocks be soft, belly soft, the back soft, base of the skull, and letting the brain rest in its cradle, participating in breathing. Letting the face be soft, hands soft, whole body soft. Starting off with being curious as to whether basic mindfulness is present or not. So Sutta says, if the mindfulness awakening factor is present, one knows, there is the mindfulness awakening factor. If the mindfulness awakening factor is not present, one knows, there is no mindfulness awakening factor in me. One knows how the unarisen mindfulness awakening factor can arise, and how the arisen mindfulness awakening factor can be perfected by development. If the investigation of dhammas, awakening factor, is present, one knows there is the investigation of dhammas, awakening factor in me. If the investigation of dhammas, awakening factor, is not present, one knows there is no investigation of dhammas, awakening factor in me. One knows how the unarisen investigation of dhammas, awakening factor, can arise, and how the arisen investigation of dhammas, awakening factor, can be perfected by development. And if we understand investigation of dhammas to mean this ability to turn awareness back on our own subjective experience, just notice, is it tending towards contraction? Is it tending towards release? If the energy awakening factor is present, one knows there is the energy awakening factor in me. If the energy awakening factor is not present, one knows there is no energy awakening factor in me. One knows how the unarisen energy awakening factor can arise, and how the arisen energy awakening factor can be perfected by development. And this might be strong energy, or it might simply be the absence of sloth and torpor. So being curious about energy in our experience. If the joy awakening factor is present, one knows there is the joy awakening factor in me. If the joy awakening factor is not present, one knows there is no joy awakening factor in me. One knows how the unarisen joy awakening factor can arise and how the arisen joy awakening factor can be perfected by development. So this is piti or pretty, and one translation is joyful interest. Otherwise it's things like enthusiasm, maybe physical feelings of release. So being curious about the presence or the absence and how you can open to this in your experience and stabilize it if it's arisen. If the tranquility awakening factor is present, one knows there is the tranquility awakening factor in me. If the tranquility awakening factor is not present, one knows there is no tranquility awakening factor in me. One knows how the unarisen tranquility awakening factor can arise and how the arisen tranquility awakening factor can be perfected by development. Other translations are calmness and serenity, the stilling, settling quality. If the concentration awakening factor is present, one knows there is the concentration awakening factor in me. If the concentration awakening factor is not present, one knows there is no concentration awakening factor in me. One knows how the unarisen concentration awakening factor can arise, and how the arisen concentration awakening factor can be perfected by development. And concentration here doesn't mean a forced, willed, strained, effortful state of mind. It's more the natural arising, settling. If we bring to mind the story of the Buddha remembering being under the rose apple tree when he was a child, it's that quality. Natural, easeful, stabilized mind. If the equanimity awakening factor is present, one knows there is the equanimity awakening factor in me. If the equanimity awakening factor is not present, one knows there is no equanimity awakening factor in me. One knows how the unarisen equanimity awakening factor can arise, and how the arisen equanimity awakening factor can be perfected by development. Another translation I've heard for equanimity is equipoise, which I think is very beautiful. It's this quality of balance where we're not tipping towards, away from, going round and round, but we're alert, vibrant, still, poised. Bringing the weight of the body to the foreground of awareness, stability. For the last few moments, let's let go of any effort whatsoever. Just sit, absorb, assimilate, rest. Taking all of our awareness into adjusting our posture if we want to. I'm curious to know what happened out there. It's by placing your attention on these different qualities or the absence thereof. What was your experience? Thank you.
Yeah, I was really struck by the use of enthusiasm for pretty, because I think I found pretty, joy, fullness, or something like that, just a bit hard to find, but enthusiasm I can always find. So when that came in, I thought, okay, where can I feel enthusiasm? So I felt it kind of in my guts, it's kind of quite low down. And then when I touched into this sense of enthusiasm, it was like very small pockets of light just kind of like shining through. And then quite quickly, anxiety arose and I had this little sensation here, which is quite familiar actually, when I feel anxiety is kind of here. And I could feel this kind of constriction and then some adrenaline, only a little bit, kind of releasing. So I tried to stay interested with that, and I was curious about, well, how can I be with that, and also what can I bring to that? So imagine breathing love down inwards, like this warm summer breeze kind of like coming into my guts and through my body, which then felt very pleasant. So start with enthusiasm, go through anxiety, and then there's some kind of release and then pleasantness.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when I feel like I kind of need maybe a bit more support or love, Padmasambhava comes in. So I imagined it just had this sense of just sitting on his robe, so he's huge, I'm just sat there around these robes, and at first it feels like, oh, I'm just kind of coming inwards and receiving this nourishment and love, and then I have this sense of opening, kind of like, you know, sitting a bit more tall, like, yes, okay, I've received a bit more here, though I actually need to be with this. And then when I noticed that, I went straight into my head, because I thought, oh, there's going to be inquiry after this. I can tell Vidyamala all about it. This is fantastic. So I really need to get this process organised and sorted, so I can really tell what's going to happen. I just got so stuck in my head that actually trying to come out of it, when you were talking about equanimity and tranquility, I was trying to contact that, but I was just so in my head. But then I was laughing to myself, thinking, God, it's just this, you know, it's just this habit of, I want to do the right thing. And look at me, I'm kind of, there's something about it, it feels right, I've got it, it's great. So I have to tell the teacher, you know, and I was just going through this process, and laughing at myself, going, oh God, really? So, but I didn't want to share it because, it, you know, actually, yeah, there was a process, and yeah.
That's brilliant.
There's quite a lot of all sorts of stuff in there.
A lot of awareness.
It was.
You were really tracking what was happening, and that is the practice. Yeah, so I've got just a few questions. I'm wondering whether people might have heard that, because you were speaking fairly loudly. Do you think do I have to repeat all that, do you think? Does anyone know whether, has anyone asked the tech team whether the people out there can, sorry?
Can someone tell us whether they heard it?
I know, can you just let us know?
We could, if somebody's up for it, you could have the second mic when you're saying stuff.
That would be deeply intimidating.
Yeah.
No, we'll just stay. Maybe we'll ask them in the tea break. Better late than never. Day 6 of the retreat or something. Anyway, so that was a really wonderful description. I just have to summarise it, if that's okay, of finding the translation of piti, priti as enthusiasm helpful. And Leela Shuri was saying, yeah, it sounds like that's a quality you experience in your life, so you know what enthusiasm feels like. And then it was down in your belly, and there were little pockets of light. It was very beautiful, little pockets of light. And then you went to anxiety, which was in your throat. And again, that was a bit familiar. And then you had an encounter with Padmasambhava. Now, this was a really, for me, very interesting creative point where you called on Padmasambhava when you were feeling a bit. And just as a little aside at this point, this is where we're very fortunate in our tradition that we have the whole Buddhist tradition to call on. You know, if we were Theravada practitioners just with the Satipatthana Sutta, we wouldn't even know about Padmasambhava. But Bante's given us so much. And so you called on the support of Padmasambhava, and you were inside his robes, I think. And at first you were a bit small, receiving, and then actually you got bigger when I was watching you, and you said, and then I stood tall, and it's like literally, I thought, wow, look, she's just... And then you got into a whole big rehearsing thing of, oh, good, I've got something to say in the inquiry. And then there was reflection on, that's me. I want to please the teacher. So much learning. Oh, and then the other thing that was interesting is, then there was pleasure. You had the Padmasambhava, and then there was pleasure. So I was interested in whether that pleasure had the quality of the sort of calmness, serenity, or was it still a bit bubbly?
There was definitely pockets of calmness. I'm just trying to come back into it now. I think that, the sense of coming up, there was a calmness from the back actually, but it was still quite bubbly at the front. Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, good. Just change from this anxiety. So yeah, there was that. Yeah, there was a calmness at the back, this kind of uprising with its support, calm at the back. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So in terms of the natural energetic unfoldment that's described here, as it is in dhyanas and the positive Nidana chain, say if you had an intention, let's let this settle into calm. as the sutta. What would have happened if you'd stayed with the back of your body? You'd stayed with just imagining you had the bubbliness in the front and there was this calm at the back, and you thought, okay, let me just dwell there. What do you think might have happened if you'd made that kind of choice?
I guess the choice to stay with the calm at the back, because it was quite difficult at times. That's when I went straight into my head, because I noticed all those changes and I went into my head of, oh yeah, great, there's going to be inquiry, I want to feed this back. But it was, so if I would have stayed in calm in the back, I guess it would have moved forward and moved round, and maybe dropped into something more settled and deeper. Yeah, because that fizzy energy was very much related to the head. It was all going up there, up front of the body.
So that's a really great insight you've just described to yourself there. You know, if you'd chosen to, okay, this is the calm arising, I've got a little taste of it. If I rest there, and you seemed really in it when you're just describing it, then you imagined it would have come to the front and the sides and you would have settled. So that's exactly what the sutta is describing. We're using our mindfulness to sort of track what's actually happening. And then if we get the little seeds of this sort of opening, calming quality, to rest there and allow that to become more interesting and more sustained than the fizzy, heady stuff. And that's a beautiful description, because often what we think we do is we just sort of think, I shouldn't be fizzy anymore, I've got to suppress that and be calm. And then we just sort of freeze up again. Whereas both are present, and then you might choose to just dwell more in the calming phase at that point. Whereas say if we're just arriving and we're a bit confused, we might decide to dwell with the energy uplifting phase to sort of help us be present, and then let me just calm this down. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And thank you for being so honest. I'm sure lots of us could really relate to what you were saying. Yeah. And it's good that you said something. Just imagine if you'd gone through all that and then you hadn't said anything.
I know, it would have been wasted.
Wasted, exactly. Just imagine if there hadn't been inquiry. Then you would have had a whole other drama. Yeah. So maybe just one more person and then we'll stop for a break. If there's anyone else who wants to share your process.
Yeah, so I think the main thing I noticed was a sense of all I have to do is to just stay with the breath and let your instructions, your suggestions filter in and notice what's happening. And so with each of the bits, I had a sense of, oh, could there be some of this present? Am I mindful? Yeah, I'm engaged. I'm here, I'm present to my experience. Is there any joy? Not sure, but it's quite satisfying. So it just felt like nothing dramatic, and yet it felt like, oh, there's taste. There's taste of these in my experience. And I think it was only probably right at the end that I got into thinking about something else for a bit. So the overall sense was of being quite engaged, curious, and just sort of, could my habitual tendency to think, well, I can't experience any joy, there's no joy here, well, I'm not very calm, I'm failing.
Yeah.
Instead of that, there was just a kind of, oh, well, let's just, could this be a bit calm here? Or, just that sort of curious exploration without the expectation that I think I normally have, which then sabotages stuff.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, and again, so much awareness, particularly your reflections on your habits. even that awareness of, I usually expect it should be something different, then I sabotage and think I'm failing. Well, you've just described beautifully a meditation where you were not failing. And that, I mean, I find that very satisfying to hear as the person leading the meditation. I can't tell you how satisfying that is, because that's my deepest wish, is that you all realize, oh yeah, I have got these experiences. Little tastes, little glimmerings. It doesn't need to be ecstatic, doesn't need to be amazing, but this is what the Buddha's teaching us, that these qualities are always present, and how can we, or these little glimmerings of them, or the conditioning factors where they could arise are always present. And so just to sort of build our confidence in our actual experience rather than our ideas of about what experience should be. Yeah, and how do you feel now at the end of it?
I'm nervous about, when I'm not in these good conditions, how it's going to be. And I'm also, there's also that sense of there's excitement.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. So there's excitement, and then there's a bit of nervousness about when I'm at home, will it happen again? So what would it be like to just let that go and stay present, knowing that this is actually a conditioning factor for the future? Just being with it right now is the conditioning factor for the future, amongst other things. Yeah. And as we talked about last night in our group, actually, that you talked about excitement and nervousness. Those are describing particular, the ways we're evaluating a particular experience, but actually energetically they're so similar, excitement and nervousness. So, why do we decide to call it one thing rather than the other thing? Very interesting. Yeah, so Vajrasara, yeah. Thanks, Padmalila.
Just a quick comment, actually, the exploration. What really struck me at the end was how attention, focus, and presence, in the way you have just led it, very organically led to a bhavana. They sort of came together without any forcing. It was just very natural unfolding. I like the interweaving of the two kind of modes.
Yeah. That's very interesting, because sometimes again, it's language, isn't it? We can be so binary about everything. We're either pure awareness or bhavana. I've never understood that kind of the argument. I've always sort of a false dichotomy that, attending, well, there is a bit of effort involved, and it's also opening. So I think that's beautiful what you said, that I think it is a bhavana, and at some point we're going to hear the Karaniya Chaitanya Sutta. Is that what it's called? I think. Dhammarati? Something like that. It's a beautiful sutta, and it's exactly that, about how all these states arise without an act of will. And yet they arise. It's very mysterious. On that note, let's take, in all seriousness, let's take this body, this heart, this mind into a break, where we stay open to all these qualities. There's always this opportunity for opening to our experience present. So let's take that into the experience of going to the toilet, having a drink, enjoying the overcast day. And we'll come back at, can we come back at 10 to 15-minute break? I think 15 minutes is that long enough for people to, sorry?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Good. Good. That's what I was looking for, a definite answer, and that's what I got. Sorry? It's only 12 minutes, so come back at 5 to. Yeah.
just wanted to start off with a little spontaneous appreciation of Vidyamala. I was saying to her after the session, I think she's more accurate about other people's mental states than I am about my own. I think that was an absolutely awesome quality of listening to what somebody else was describing. So I want to be like that when I grow up. So we're going to cover the same ground again, sort of back to the awakening factors, the bodhiyangas, but come at them in relationship to the breath, or the breath in relationship to the bodhiyangas. One of the things that the Buddha explicitly says in the Anapanasati Sutta is that it's a way of using the breath to explore the four Satipatthanas. So you're giving yourself a very simple tool to help you to connect with that spectrum of experience. And just to quote Bhante a little bit from the seminar, he says that maybe the most straightforward way to think about developing the bodhiyangas is to consider that they're simply the states that arise from establishing mindfulness more and more firmly. And the more you cultivate the Satipatthanas, the more these factors of enlightenment can be expected to grow. So that, first of all, I think, again, we're back to this sort of natural process that starts to arise as we take awareness into experience. So you become more aware of the breath, breathe into the body, and the body tends to naturally release, tends to naturally calm. Out of that calming comes a natural release of energy. And it's not always as linear as that, it's not always as tidy as that, but broadly speaking, as a process, you see that happening. I was remembering a conversation I was sort of privy to that happened at Majjhimaloka. It was Bhante meeting with some of the people who were involved in meditation teaching, involved in sort of meditation retreat teaching. And it was a discussion around Tathagata Garbha and this idea, just the observation that for a lot of people, there's a real kind of lack of confidence sometimes in our capacity to be present, to open up, to have access to these sort of deeper meditation experiences. And one of the people in the discussion was sort of making the case for Tathagata Garbha, this idea that there's a kind of fundamental nature as something that was a real support for confidence. And it's interesting, Bhante is obviously, or all the way through his teaching, obviously quite cautious about the whole idea of Tathagata Garbha because it brings in sort of metaphysical sort of difficulties down the line. But one of the things that I was really struck by in that discussion is he said that he thought in the early tradition the positive nidanas played the same role that Tathagata Garbha did in the later tradition. And what he was saying is that in the positive nidanas, it's a description of a capacity of the mind that is just absolutely available. That if you set the conditions up, what the positive nidanas are describing isn't this random quality. It's not a quality that some minds have and other minds don't have. It's an unfolding sequence that's just part of the nature of the mind. And that if we set the conditions up, that unfolding sequence, almost just as part of the nature of things, starts to unfold. And again, I don't want to make this too linear, don't want to make it too mechanical, but he was saying it's, in a way, it's real ground for confidence, that, you know, you take awareness into your experience starts to change. And it doesn't change at random, it changes in a shape that the Nidanas are describing that's part of the nature of the mind, even it's part of the nature of reality. Going back to Subhuti's one-liner that I quoted earlier, that there are currents in reality that lead in the direction of liberation. And our job as practitioners is to cooperate with those currents. And what you're getting in a lot of these formulations, Vidyamala was saying that the bodhiyangas, the positive nidanas, the sequence that the anapanasati goes through, they're all describing fundamentally the same process. And it's the process of the mind increasingly concentrated and liberated, and that happening on the basis of the conditions that we set up. And I mean, it's interesting that this was obviously one of Bante's real emphases, this whole thing about spiral conditionality or positive conditionality. And it looks like the description of that in terms of the nidanas aren't so frequent, like Bhante quotes the Upanisa Sutta as the kind of clearest description of that, and subsequently that was picked up by Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's really been emphasizing the importance of it. But even if the description of the positive nidanas isn't that frequent through the Pali Canon, the bodhiyangas are everywhere. Like this description of this unfolding positive sequence is a very, very common one, and its frequency gives you a clue to the importance of how the tradition sees it. So what you're touching on in this sequence of the bodhiyangas is this description of how we set up the conditions that support that unfolding process of the bodhiyangas in our own experience. I try not to go into sort of too much prapancha, but one of the things that was struck in Vidyamala's presentation, she was saying that each of the awakening factors in a way is accessible at any time. You can sort of step in at any point in the sequence. And I think quite often, almost this slightly mysterious thing with Buddhist classifications of mental states, you can see them in two ways. You can see them as a mandala, and any aspect of the experience is a point of entry into the mandala. So you've got the body, you can contact mindfulness through the body, you can move into the impermanence, you can contact it through feelings, you can move into the impermanence of it. So you can see them as an arrangement on a level, each of which is a doorway into deeper experience. You can also see them as a sequence. You can see the body as the condition for what arises in feeling, feeling as the condition for what arises in the mind, and so on. And I think those two models aren't contradictory. They're just two ways of accessing the experience. You can come in at any point, or you can see unfolding patterns within that experience. So this time I want to kind of emphasize a little bit that sequence, the bodhiyangas as a kind of an unfolding pattern. Just to quote Bhante one last time, he says that the important thing is to get the feel of this gradual progression, this sense of everything coming together, energy welling up, a continuous upward movement running right up to the attainment of insight and beyond. So that's his description of the bodhiyangas, that what you're trying to do is to get a feel of this gradual progression, this sort of deepening current as the mind releases itself. So again, not wanting to make this sort of any more complicated than it needs to be. So let's use the kind of anapanasati structure, using the breath just as a tool for setting up the conditions of sort of stepping more and more deeply into this process of the bodhiyangas. And I'll try and do it as simply as I'm able to in my own experience. So I'll give just a couple of little cues as we go through it. So just tuning in to ourselves right now. This lovely little description in the sutta of going to a secluded place, hut, foot of a tree. Just this sense of not allowing other pulls on our attention to be too strong. Just beginning with this intention to attend to our experience. Thank you, Vidyamala. Trouble is, you get more concentrated, you get quieter. So I will try to speak up a little more. And then the instruction in the sutta is to bring mindfulness to the fore. So again, just that tuning in to that quality of openness and curiosity. What's it like when that quality is present in the awareness, present in our mind? And bringing that quality of mindfulness, in particular, onto the breath. Bringing that openness, that curiosity into the experience of breathing. What does it feel like? What does this next breath feel like? So right from the start, the awakening factor of mindfulness. Then the instruction, breathing in a long breath. I know I'm breathing a long breath. Breathing a short breath. I know I'm breathing a short breath. Starting to be a bit more aware of the detail, the character, the texture of what we're attending to. This kind of attentiveness, this capacity to see the nature of what we're attending to. It's the awakening factor of Dharma Vichaya, investigation. Noticing whether or not the quality of energy is present, quality of virya. In this context, that energy expresses itself in a choice to engage with the experience more deeply. So one trains oneself, sensitive to the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out. That choice to have our energy engaging with our experience. The awakening factor of virya. Just noticing where we are now. Noticing if we're managing to sustain that connection. Noticing if our mind's gone somewhere else. And patiently, gently choosing again to engage with our experience. One trains oneself. To the extent we're able to connect with the breath and the body, just noticing, attending to any experience of calm that's naturally arising. Be something quite subtle. Just looking for a receptive awareness that allows that quality of calm to disclose itself. The awakening factor of passaddhi, tranquility, expressing itself in relationship to the body. Just noticing in our experience if there's pleasure present. Pleasure of connecting to our experience. Pleasure of the body calming. Pleasure of breathing. Again, just looking for a receptive awareness that allows that pleasure to reveal itself, however subtle it is. The awakening factor of piti. To the extent it's there, just noticing what happens if we take our awareness onto that experience. We give it the space to become a bit more central in our mind stream, opening up to that quality of piti. Whether or not that piti is arising, just looking for a willingness to be with our experience as it is, attending to our experience as it is. A quality of openness, curiosity. Supporting that quality of contentment. sensitive to sukha. I breathe in, I breathe out. Again, the awakening factor of passaddhi in this area of our feelings. Tranquility. The basis of that connection with ourselves, openness to piti and sukha, that sense of the mind starting to calm more deeply into sukha. Just noticing the quality of the awareness, quality of the mind itself. Reminding ourselves what that open, responsive, curious quality of mindfulness is like. Just tuning into that to the extent that we can. Noticing any tendency in the mind to pull towards, any tendency to push away. Any tendency to get lost in our experience, to go round in circles? Awakening factor of Dhamma Vichaya and the dimension of our mind. Breathing in the quality of the mind with awareness, with love. Just letting ourselves relax back into that openness. Just noticing the extent to which the awakening factor of concentration is there. Awareness a bit more stable. Open and responsive to the whole spectrum of our experience. Gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind. I breathe in, I breathe out. And just noticing if equanimity is present in our experience. Equanimity in the sense that there's nothing we're resisting, nothing we're pushing away, holding on less and less. Just that quality of openness, connection, more and more the quality of our response to whatever arises. Just aware of this as a natural quality of our own minds. Whenever we lose connection with it, just going back to the simple step of mindfulness. What's happening in our experience right now? From that mindfulness, a sense of connection. From that sense of connection, alive to the pleasure of it. Bring that quality of attention to whatever arises in our experience. The awakening factor of upekkha, equanimity. And to finish, just dropping any effort that we're making. Just relaxing back into simple connection with the breath and the body. Just noticing any qualitative difference in our awareness of the breath now than there was at the start of the practice. just remembering Vidyamala's analogy of the sat-nav. It might be, if you're not familiar with that structure, your attention's more on the sat-nav than it is on the landscape and trying to get your head around the shape of it. But I guess just sort of encouraging people to explore that if they find it useful. Basically, it's a description of what the positive and the dhammas feels like unfolding in our experience. It just gives you this lovely, simple structure to support that unfolding. So it's worth, if it felt a wee bit complex, just sort of persevere with it for a bit and try and get a kind of feel for that, the naturalness of the unfolding. Let's stop there.